Welcome to the video solutions for the AQA Functional Skills English Level 2 writing paper for November 2021. In this video we will go through the questions and you can get a better idea of what you want your answers to look like, as well as what to look out for when planning your answers. Before we take a look at the questions, let's have a look at the criteria that you'll be marked on so that you understand what you are being assessed on. So you need to craft a fit-for-purpose response with an appropriate level of development to engage the reader and using appropriate register. So that means that your response needs to be engaging. It needs to draw the reader in, and it needs to have an appropriate level of development. So you need to be including details and developing your ideas by explaining them with reasons or adding additional information. It has to be fit for purpose, so you have to consider the purpose that you've been asked to write for and adapt your response to the question. You also need to use an appropriate register or tone, so you need to adapt what you're writing to the audience. If you're writing for a professional audience, you'll want to use a formal tone and register, and if you're writing for, say, a friend, you would want to use an informal tone and register. You want to use appropriate formatting and make sure that your answer's the right length. So you'll often be given a word count and you need to try and stay within that. And you also need to include appropriate formatting features based on the text type. So for example, if you're writing an article, you'll need to include a heading, perhaps use subheadings and include paragraphs. You need to use a range of simple and complex words and phrases correctly. So vary the sentence structures that you're using and use a range of words and phrases. Use a variety of sentence structures, including complex sentences, correctly. So again, making sure that both your word choices and your sentence structures are varied throughout the text. Use some longer sentences and shorter sentences, use longer words and shorter words. And make sure that any words that you're using are suitable for the task. You want to provide a clear and logical sequencing of points in your text. So think before you start writing your answer how you're going to order the points you want to make in a logical way. And you need to include an appropriate level of detail for the purpose. So read the question carefully and think about appropriate details that you can include in the answer. We also need to consider spelling, punctuation and grammar. So make sure that your spelling is correct and can convey your meaning effectively. Try to use specialist words in your answers as well that are adapted to the specific purpose of the text. You also need to demarcate your sentences correctly. So that means that you're using capital letters at the start of each sentence and full stops at the end. And you need to be using a range of other punctuation correctly. So for example, you want to be using commas and apostrophes accurately. You need to use these markers to ensure smooth and efficient reading. So make sure that your punctuation is helping the reader rather than hindering them when they're reading. So helping to make your meaning really clear. You need to make sure that you have few grammatical errors. So all of your writing needs to make sense. You also need to use modality devices appropriately. So modality devices include modal verbs like might, could, will or should. So make sure that you are doing that correctly and make sure that you have some subject and verb agreement within your answers. So for example, you would say I think, but you would say he or she thinks. So you need to make sure that you're changing verbs depending on the subject that you're using. So make sure that your spelling, punctuation and grammar are accurate, as well as having a good composition for your text. Question 1. You have read the following on the Branby.com website. Here at the Branby Community Forum, we'd like to know what inspired you during lockdown. Was it a box set that had you gripped, or that new album you couldn't stop listening to? Did you get heavily involved in a compelling book? Did you watch a special film that worked its magic? Was it a sporting event that captured your imagination? We want others to share your experience, and we hope to post an anthology of the best reports so that others can benefit. Go online to branby.com and submit your report. You want to take part in the branby.com forum. Write a report about something that inspired you during lockdown. Your report should be between 150 and 200 words. Always remember to plan your answer, use correct spelling, punctuation and grammar, and write clearly and effectively. So we need to identify what we are being asked to do here. And one of the most important things that we need to know is what text type we're being asked to write. So the text type that we need to write here is a report. So reports are going to include lots of facts and then possibly a summary of the facts, and reports with often have recommendations at the end as well. And what is the report going to be about? Well, what is our purpose? It is to write about something that inspired you during lockdown. So we've got some examples of things that we could write about here. So a box set, so like videos and stuff, or a new album, or a compelling book. So they're just some examples of things that you could write about, or you could come up with something else and get creative with this question. So that's our purpose. Now we need to identify the audience that we're writing for. So we're writing for a website, and it's on the Branby Community Forum. So Branby is a place, and we are looking at a local community. So we're writing for a local community of people. It's quite a general audience to write for. We also need to know how much we need to write, and we need to write between 150 to 200 words overall. So now let's look at an example answer that answers this question really effectively. The book that made lockdown bearable, War and Peace. During lockdown, I listened to the War and Peace audiobook while completing everyday chores. A very long book. Before I started listening, I knew very little about the book, aside from the fact that it is incredibly long. Trawling through a physical copy of it seemed like a chore, but listening to it while completing other activities filled each day with inspiration. A gripping story. Although there are parts of the book that feel very dated, it is filled with aristocratic parties and hunting trips. There were many highs and lows to enjoy. From a bear attending a party to a sweet girl becoming sick almost to the point of death, the book made me reflect on humanity and was gripping throughout. There were also interesting insights into the way that history is written that would intrigue any philosopher. Conclusion. The book inspired me to think about people and the way they live their lives in a completely new way. As a history enthusiast, I was captivated by the writer's ideas about historical narratives, and it inspired me to learn more about the period in which the book is set. So now let's use the marking criteria to analyse why this is a good answer. And we'll start by looking at the punctuation. So in this answer, every single sentence begins with a capital letter and ends with a full stop. And you need to make sure that you're doing this in your answers too, so that your writing is easy to read and your sentences are separate from one another. It also includes lots of commas to add additional information and to break up sentences into different clauses. So we've got during lockdown, so we've got that sort of time that's indicated there, and then a comma, because the reader would take a breath if they were reading out loud there. So you would say, during lockdown, I listened to the War and Peace audiobook. We've also got commas to add additional information. So for example, trawling through a physical copy of it seemed like a chore, but listening to it while completing other activities filled each day with inspiration. So we've added information there using a comma and a connective word. Let's take a look and see if we can spot any other pieces of punctuation. So in the title, we have a colon here. Now a colon just divides the main part of the title from the secondary part of the title. So we've got the book that made lockdown bearable. That is what the article is about. And then a bit more detail, it tells us what that book is, War and Peace. We've also got an ellipsis that has been used here. A very long book, and the ellipsis builds some suspense for the reader. So when the reader starts reading that, they want to be engaged with the text, and using punctuation can help you to do that. We also have some parentheses here, and these add some additional information into sentences. So there are some parts of the book that feel very dated, and then we've got the brackets to add a little bit of an explanation of that before we move on with the sentence. So try to use a range of punctuation in your answers. If you're struggling, then just make sure that you know how to use capital letters, full stops and commas really effectively, and that you can use apostrophes when they're needed. Next, let's consider the grammar in this answer. So in this answer, all of the sentences are accurate and everything makes sense on its own. We've got all of the nouns and verbs matching up. So for example, we've got the way they live their lives. Now, because we're talking about multiple people here, we've decided to use they and live. But if we were talking about an individual person, we would say the way he or she lives their life. So because we've got a plural here, because we're referring to lots of different people, we've got live and lives, but you would change that if it was just one person. So make sure that all of your verbs and nouns match up in your answer like that. Now let's think about the spelling. The spelling is correct throughout this answer, and it includes some words that are more difficult to spell. So for example, we have the word incredibly, we've got trawling, we've got physical, and we've got listening. So try to include some longer words in your answer if you know how to spell them. If you really struggle with spelling, then don't attempt to spell any words that you think you might be spelling incorrectly, because your accuracy is far more important than trying to include really long, sort of ambitious vocabulary. Strong spelling, punctuation and grammar will help to make your meaning clear, and reading out the answer will help you to make sure that everything makes sense to the reader. You also need to make sure that your answers are an appropriate length and include appropriate details. So if we take a look at the question, we know that we are supposed to write between 150 and 200 words, and this answer satisfies that word count. We've also got a range of relevant details that have been included. So we've been asked to write about something that inspired us during lockdown. And this person has decided to write about the book that made lockdown bearable. So they've chosen to write about a book, which was one of the options given in the question. So they've given the example of the book and they've shared their experience in a report. They've given details about how they read the book. They read it as an audiobook while completing everyday chores. And they've given additional details about what happens in the book and why they enjoyed it. So they explain a little bit about what happens here and then a little bit about why they enjoy it, especially in the conclusion here. And they are recommending the book to the reader quite persuasively. So all of the details that are included are appropriate for this answer, because if we take a look at the question, all the different parts of the question have been answered. So we have responded and said what inspired us during lockdown, and then shared the experience, so given details about what the experience was like, and it tried to persuade the reader that it is an inspirational thing that they should maybe engage with as well. The answer is also formatted and organised appropriately. So when you're thinking about formatting your answer, you need to consider the text type that you're writing. And here we need to write a report. So the features of a report include a heading, and reports often also have subheadings. So we have subheadings which give a short summary of what each section is going to be about. You could also try and include bullet points and numbered lists if they are appropriate, or use a table in a report if you need to include some kind of statistics and numbers. But the most important things are to ensure that you have a heading, maybe try to include some subheadings, and always use paragraphs in every single answer that you write. Using paragraphs will allow you to make your answer cohesive. So this means that you can join up ideas effectively so that everything flows on from each other in sort of a logical order. So in this answer, we have sentences and paragraphs that flow on from one another and are linked together. All sentences that are in the same paragraph are focusing on the same thing. So in this first paragraph, we've got, before I started listening, I knew very little about the book, aside from the fact that it is incredibly long. So we've mentioned that the book is long. And then the next sentence builds on this idea. So we've got, trawling through a physical copy of it seemed like a chore. So because it's a very long book, it would be very difficult to read a physical copy. So we've linked those two sentences together. But listening to it while completing other activities filled each day with inspiration. So link your sentences together within paragraphs and make sure that you're talking about the same thing in every sentence when it's in the same paragraph. We've then got the next paragraph, which explains parts of the story. So we've given a bit of an introduction here, and then we have explained that the book is long, and we've said how we've read it, that we've been completing other activities while listening to the audiobook. And then we've got a description of the story, so we're following in sort of a logical order with each paragraph. And we've given some indication of the things that intrigued them about the book. So it made them reflect on humanity, and there were insights into the way history is written. And then we have a conclusion, which sort of summarises and draws points together. So they've explained the effect of the book, what the book inspired them to think about. So the book inspired me to think about people and the way they live their lives. So this follows in a really logical way because we've given details about how we read the book and why we decided to read it. We've explained a little bit about the plot of the book and what it made us think about. And then we've given a summary of the impact that the book had on the reader. So try to make sure that you are joining your paragraphs together in a logical sort of order. Also try to use some connective words and punctuation. These will make your sentences and paragraphs a little bit more complex and more cohesive. So for example, we've got some words and phrases that have been used to signify time. So we've got during lockdown and before I started listening. This adds some structure to the answer and makes it really clear to the reader what you're talking about and when you're talking about it. We've also got some connective words such as but to add additional ideas and information. So here we're creating a contrast using the word but. And then if we scroll down, we have the word although to start this paragraph. So it slightly adds a bit of linkage between ideas. So we've got a contrast again here. Although there are parts of the book that feel very dated, there were many highs and lows to enjoy. So contrasting the first part of the sentence with the second part. So try to structure your answer effectively and organise your paragraphs in a logical way. And also try to connect some ideas together using connective words. We also need to consider the language and register that has been used. So your writing will have to have the right kind of tone and style to match up with the purpose and audience that the text is designed for. So let's give ourselves a quick reminder of the audience and purpose. We are writing for the community in Branby, and we need to explain what inspired us during lockdown. So we need to share our experience, that's part of what we need to do. And we want others to benefit from our ideas. So we're going to try and persuade people that the thing that we did was inspiring and they should do it too. So this answer matches up with that purpose really well. The focus is on something that they did during lockdown to inspire them throughout the answer. It's also suited to members of the local community because we have sort of written in a quite formal style, not too informal because it's for a general audience here. We're not writing for friends or family, so we want to keep it somewhat formal so that it's very clear what we're saying. It's generally written in quite a positive tone, so we want to persuade the reader that this is an inspirational book, and a lot of different persuasive methods have been used to try and get the reader interested. So for example, we have words like gripping to try and persuade the reader that the book is really interesting, and it has highs and lows to enjoy. We've also got words like captivated and inspired. So we're trying to persuade the reader here using this sort of positive tone and positive emotive language. So make sure that for all questions in the exam, you're adapting your writing, your language and your register to match up with the audience and purpose. You also need to try and use some more complicated sentences. So include some longer sentences in your work so that you can show the examiner that you can link sentences together, link up lots of ideas and add detail. So for example, we have this longer sentence here. From a bear attending a party to a sweet girl becoming sick almost to the point of death, the book made me reflect on humanity and was gripping throughout. So here we have some commas that have been used to divide up parts of the sentence and to connect these ideas together. So we've got a bear attending a party, that's one idea, and we've got a sweet girl that becomes sick in the book as well. And then we've got a comma to link this to the next part of the sentence, which explains the effect that this narrative has had on the reader. So the book made them reflect on humanity, and then we've got another comma and we've got a connective word here and to add some additional information to explain their opinion that the book was gripping throughout. So try to connect your ideas together within sentences using commas and connective words. So overall, this is a really effective answer because we have addressed the question. The answer makes sense and everything flows effectively with effective use of paragraphs to link different ideas in a logical order. Correct formatting has been used in the answer, so we have all of the formatting features that are required for a report. We've also got accurate spelling throughout the answer, and a range of punctuation has been used correctly. The writing is clear and the grammar is accurate. This means that the writing is overall really appropriate and really effective. The writing is also really well suited to the audience and purpose that have been specified in the question. So now that you've seen what a good answer looks like, try to write your own answer and then go through each of the criteria and check that you have met each piece of criteria. So now let's take a look at the second question. You received the following leaflet through your letterbox. Branby Cosmo Foods. the best takeaway service in town. Pizzas, curries, kebabs, burgers, fish. Over 150 dishes to choose from, super fast service, polite staff, reasonable prices. And then we've got some contact details here. You used Branby Cosmo Foods for a takeaway, but were unhappy with the service. You write an email to Carla McLeod, giving a full account of your experience and why you were not happy. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to identify the text type that we are going to be writing, and we've been asked to write an email. So we need to be thinking about what formatting features we need to include in an email. We also need to consider the audience. So our audience is Carla McLeod, and we know that Carla McLeod is the manager of Branby Cosmo Foods. Now we need to consider the purpose. So we are giving a full account of our experience. So we're describing what happened, and then we are explaining why we were not happy with the service that we had. So what was it about the takeaway that made us unhappy? And we've got some ideas that we might want to consider here. So they've said that they offer a super fast service, so maybe the service wasn't as fast as you expected. Or perhaps the staff were impolite or the prices were too high. Now, even though we're going to use quite a negative tone for this email because we are unhappy with the service, because we are writing to the manager of a company, we need to remain professional. And that means that we need to use formal, respectful language throughout the email. So now let's take a look at an example answer that gives a really, really effective response to this question. Incorrect pizza delivery. Dear Ms. McLeod, I am emailing regarding an incorrect recent order with Branby Cosmo Foods. I ordered a 14-inch cheeky chicken pizza via the Eateroo app to celebrate my mother's birthday on the 12th of June. Although the delivery was quick, the pizza that arrived contained spicy pepperoni rather than the chicken and sweet corn that my family were expecting. My two younger siblings were unable to eat the spicy food, and I was left incredibly disappointed as the birthday celebration was ruined. I tried to call Branby Cosmo Foods twice to tell them about the issue, but both times I was greeted by a cold, automated message informing me that the line was busy. This made me feel unheard, and in my opinion, employing more staff to answer the phones would increase the professionalism of your company and the satisfaction of your customers. As the pizza was relatively expensive, I would appreciate either a refund or a free pizza in the future as compensation for our negative experience. Yours sincerely, Jacob Mountbatten. So let's start analysing this answer, and we'll begin with punctuation. So as in the last answer, we have capital letters at the start of each sentence and full stops at the end. We've also got commas that have been used to add additional details and to break up different clauses in sentences. So we have a comma here, for example, although the delivery was quick, and we take a little breathing space. The pizza that arrived contained spicy pepperoni. And then we have another comma here before we add additional details, so before we use this connective word and. So make sure that whenever you take a breath within a sentence, you're adding in a comma, and add commas whenever you need to add additional information as well. What other punctuation have we got in here? Well, we have a hyphen. Now a hyphen draws two words, or in this case, a word and a number together. So we've got a 14-inch pizza and 14 inches being used as a single word with a single meaning. We have some quotation marks around cheeky chicken because this is the name that the company has given to the pizza. It's sort of a nickname for it, and for any kind of nicknames or so-called items we need to be using these quote marks. We've also got an apostrophe that has been used. So for mother's birthday, the birthday belongs to the mother, so we need a possessive apostrophe here because she owns the birthday in a way. So try to use a range of punctuation in your own answers and try to be ambitious with your punctuation if you know how to use a wide range of punctuation. However, it's the most important that you remember to use capital letters, full stops and commas, and if you use any possessives or any other words that require apostrophes, include those as well. Now let's consider grammar and spelling. So remember that all of your sentences need to make sense on their own, and any nouns and verbs need to match up. So here we have my 2 younger siblings were unable to eat the spicy food, and I was left incredibly disappointed. So because we are writing about my 2 younger siblings, so that's more than one person, we are using the verb were. Now if we were just talking about ourselves, if we said I was unable to eat the spicy food, we would make sure that that were changes into a was. I was unable, they were unable. So make sure that your nouns and your verbs are matching up. It's also important to spell words correctly throughout your answer, and you should try to include more difficult to spell words if you know how to spell these accurately. So for example, we have pepperoni. That's quite a specialist word that refers specifically to the takeaway topic of the question. We've also got incredibly and disappointed and celebration as well. So if you know how to spell some longer words, try to include those, but make sure that you are spelling basic words correctly and just practice until you are comfortable with spelling. So making sure that your spelling, punctuation and grammar are accurate throughout will make your answer clear and make sure that it makes sense to the reader. You also need to consider the length of your answer and the kinds of details that you're including. So let's have a look and see if the question specified a word count. We don't have a particular word count in this question, so what are we going to do? Well, we are going to write just enough detail to make sure that we are fully answering the question. And when you don't have a word count given, you should be trying to write somewhere between 3 and 5 paragraphs. Here we have 4 paragraphs, so that is definitely long enough to provide enough detail. All of the details that have been used in the answer are appropriate for the question. So we have been asked to talk about a takeaway that we were unhappy with, and that has been done throughout the answer here. We've given details about what happened, so the pizza that they ordered, why they ordered it to celebrate the mother's birthday, and then explained what happened after that, why they were unhappy. So what was wrong with the pizza is explained here, and then how they tried to resolve the issue but were unable to do so because of further problems with the staff and the phone lines. And then finally, they've added a little bit of extra detail about what they would like to happen as a result going forward. Now, all of this is really relevant to the topic of the question and to what the question has asked you to do. So make sure that you don't sort of include any irrelevant details and you're not writing about anything that hasn't been specified in the question. If you're struggling to add details, then go back to the question and try to come up with more ideas to add to your plan. Next, let's think about the formatting of this answer. So, helpfully, we have a template that has been given for us to organise the email that we're writing. So remember that whenever you're thinking about formatting and organisation, you need to consider the text type. So we've got the email address that we're writing to. This was specified within the question. So if you're ever given any contact details or anything to include in letters or emails, make sure that you're using the ones given in the question. We've also got a subject line. So a subject line is needed in every email, and it's just giving a brief summary of what the email will be about. So in this case, an incorrect pizza delivery. We've then got a polite address, nice and respectful at the start of the email. And that's really important so that the reader knows that the email is being addressed to them. And then at the end here, we have a polite sign-off and the name of the sender. So we've used yours sincerely here, and we've chosen sincerely instead of faithfully because we know the name of the person that we're writing to. It's Ms. McLeod that we are writing to. If we didn't know the name, we would put Dear Sir or Madam, and then at the end we would have yours faithfully there. We also need to make sure that in every single answer that you write, regardless of the text type, you're including paragraphs. So we've structured the answer into various paragraphs here. You also need to make sure that your answers are cohesive. So this means that you need to link sentences and paragraphs together, and you need to join up your ideas so that they flow in a logical order. In this answer, we have sentences that flow on from one another and are linked together really well. So when you're writing a paragraph, all of the sentences in the same paragraph should be about the same thing. So for example, here we have, although the delivery was quick, the pizza that arrived contained spicy pepperoni rather than chicken and sweet corn. My siblings were unable to eat this food and we were incredibly disappointed. So all of the sentences in this paragraph explain what happened, what went wrong with the pizza delivery, and how everybody felt about that. We've got a logical order in which the paragraphs are laid out. So we have the first paragraph indicates what the email will be about and gives a few details about the pizza that they ordered. Then the next paragraph follows on from this to explain what happened with the delivery and what went wrong. Then we have an explanation of how the writer tried to fix the issue, but they indicate that the staff were not helpful because they did not answer the phone. And then we have an explanation of what they would like to happen next. So everything is done in order. They've explained that they ordered the pizza, and then they've explained what happened next, and then what happened next. So it's written in a chronological order based on the order of events. Now let's think about the language and register that have been used in the answer. So we know that our writing has to be appropriate for the reader. It has to have an appropriate tone and style to match up with the reader that it's aimed at. So we know that our audience and purpose in this question, we have Carla McLeod is our audience and she's the manager of the business. And our purpose is to give a full account of our experience, so give a description of what happened and then explain why you were unhappy with this. So we need a description and an explanation. And we definitely got this in the answer. So we've met that purpose by explaining what happened and saying why we were unhappy as well. So I was left incredibly disappointed as the birthday celebration was ruined, and this made me feel unheard. So explaining how it made them feel overall. We were also really well adapting to the audience of the question. So we know that we're writing for Ms. McLeod, who is the owner of the business, and we have used a formal tone throughout the text in order to match up with this professional audience of someone that we don't know. So for example, we have formal language such as I am emailing regarding an incorrect recent order. So the answers use standard English throughout. There are no kind of slang words or anything that will make it more informal. So make sure that you are tailoring your responses to the audience and purpose of the text. And any additional details that you are adding are relevant to that audience and purpose. Finally, you should try to include some longer, more complicated sentences within your answers. This will show the examiner that you can link up multiple ideas together. So for example, we have, I tried to call Branby Cosmo Foods twice to tell them about the issue. So that's one thing that they tried to do, but both times I was greeted by a cold automated message. So here we've explained what happened both times they tried to call. So we've linked some ideas together there. And we've given a bit of an opinion about the message, saying that it was cold, so not very welcoming. Informing me that the line was busy. So we've got lots of different bits of information that have been connected together there. And then again in the next sentence, this made me feel unheard, and in my opinion, employing more staff to answer the phones would increase the professionalism of your company and the satisfaction of your customers. So can you see how in this sentence we've used commas and we've used a connective word and to make the sentence longer and to connect ideas together. So overall, this is a really effective answer. It fully addresses the question and adapts to the audience and purpose that has been specified in the question. So it focuses on the idea of a takeaway throughout and explains the reasons why they felt their order was unacceptable. We've got correct formatting in the answer for an email, and we've used paragraphs to divide the answer up into sections and make it easier for the reader to understand. This helps the answer to make sense and flow effectively. Accurate spelling, punctuation and grammar also help to make the meaning really clear and make the answer effective overall. So now have a go at writing your own answer to this question, and then make sure that you are checking the marking criteria to see if you've done everything that the examiner will want you to do during the exam.